So I'm sorry you're not feeling well. Sorry. Boy, we sure have heard that quite a bit lately, haven't we? It's amazing how sick we can become and how quickly it can all happen. We sure have learned that. And fortunately, for most of the things that ail us, not all, but most of them, there have been discoveries. There's been progress in finding ways to treat our illnesses, our symptoms, our healing. How grateful to be living at a time where so much of what happens in terms of our physical health can be addressed, if not totally cured. Some illnesses, it seems, though, well, we don't know what to do. And they don't seem to give up by themselves either. They have a way of continuing, don't they? We sometimes think they are as impossible to treat as those disciples perhaps thought it was impossible to ever move forward after the death of their teacher. But then sometimes quickly, most often little by slowly, we progress, we proceed, we discover things along the way to help heal us, to help heal others. And what I have discovered, perhaps you too, is that there are times when I don't even know how sick I am. I didn't even know I had that until something happened to make sure I knew that there was something going on. Before the death of George Floyd, before that image of a white police officer with his knee on the neck of an already subdued and handcuffed black man saying the words we've heard before with Eric Gardner, and since I can't breathe, before that image, I never expected to see that image. I never expected to see what represents just how sick, how deeply sick some of us are, and how sick this society is in the diseases and the illnesses it carries out of sight until they're not. And then I remembered all the things I thought I would never see. I remembered about the racism that is sanitized and buried deep in deep currents within our society. How it rears its ugliness at moments when the best efforts to contain it, that ugliness surfaced. And it has caused us to not only remember, but to relearn what we've forgotten. And then we're shocked and saddened. Oh my God, how could this happen? Coast to coast in what seemed like minutes. A response to the ugliness of that image, to the terrible loss of the life of George Floyd, to his family, to those who knew and loved him, to those who lived in fear of the same happening to them. We are shocked. Or are we just discomforted more that, oh no, not again? Now what? We're going to go through this again? Oh, come on. And it's been quite a week. The death of George Floyd in Minnesota was preceded by an event here in New York, in Central Park, where a black man asked a white woman to please put a leash on her dog in an area of the park where the dogs were supposed to be on leashes. How outrageous of him. What audacity. And so she did what anyone would do. She picked up that phone and she called the police and said she was being threatened by a black man. I couldn't help but wonder if we actually feel better, you know. Yeah, there you go. She got what she deserved. Look at how she's been punished and vilified. She lost her job. Her life is destroyed despite her apologies, even despite the black man's acceptance of her apology. This white woman, how dare she? I wonder how much that outrage toward her, that piling on of this intensity, which was quite remarkable, I wonder how much of that had to do with our own need for absolution for the times when we have behaved as she has and I have. I have had thoughts because I live in a racist society. I have inclinations that I don't know where they come from, other than some things have been carefully taught to me. So I wonder how much of this, how dare she, fire her, get her off her job, boom, really has to do with, feel better now because she'll make up for all of the things. We needed a scapegoat. She'll make up for everything that we have done. But then, when outrage is exhibited in large numbers by predominantly people of color in response to an injustice that has taken place, that has occurred against one of their own, that resulted in the death of another person of color, again, when that group of people lifts themselves up in outrage and protest with those who agree with them, we get uncomfortable. We get frightened. That institutional system that we are a part of feels threatened. And so we say, how dare they? Why don't they behave? How dare we? What's going to happen to us? What's going to happen to America? Get these people back under control. Do we take solace in any of this in a president whose communication abilities and his compassion are not his strongest points? Do we find motivation in his words to rise up against the injustice that we are witnessing, the response to the decades and centuries of injustice in the moment and in the history we share, if not the lived experiences, but the history we share? Do we feel encouraged, motivated to rise up and address this by a president who calls the protesters thugs, when 99% of them peacefully protested? And yes, there are people who are breaking the law. Yes, there are people who get carried away. Yes, it is wrong. But when you call a few of a group of people that you have demeaned and diminished as a whole thugs, when you call that group thugs, you call everyone in that group a thug. You should know that. You should have learned that. Except that you have, perhaps, in such good ways that it provides exactly what you want it to provide: division, distraction, discord. So one can come charging in, authoritarian inaction, to restore peace and tranquility by using the military-industrial complex again, without any attempt to address a nation that is reeling. Not reeling from outside, reeling from inside. And when you have someone who can't talk to our insides, all we ever see are the outside of things, except for those of us who long for change, know it can be better, and resist the Pax Romanesque attempts to just keep everything quiet, keep people from grumbling, keep the economy going. Keep yourself in the news. I don't know. I don't like it. Can you tell? I don't think you like it either. And I'm trying not to talk about individuals, but there are individuals who are doing these things that are not helping. There were individuals that lined that street that Jesus went down that Sunday or Saturday before they crucified him. The answer is not crucifixion. We've had enough crucifixions, and we don't need language that one day says, well, there's good people on both sides, and then when it serves you, well, they're thugs. It should not be that hard. Talk to us from the heart. Our heart is hurting. And all that brings me back to COVID-19, the pandemic, the virus we have in the midst of this national illness that has eaten away at us for centuries. Those people who are working on treatments and healing for COVID-19, they have a good understanding of the illness. They're learning more every day. They're learning about its transmission. They're learning about what slows it down. They're learning about its symptoms. They're learning about its long-term effects. They're using the entire body of science and treatment that has gone before to try and understand a way to go forward instead of shooting from the hip. The confusion has been more about the message one day and the next day from the national leadership that is impacting the way in which this disease, as well as the underlying disease of racism in this nation, is being addressed and treated by an administration, at least that has little and perhaps no experience, no history to draw upon, no understanding, no interest other than their own self-serving interests, at least by those we hear from. If you're going to single out a part of a minority of a group and call them thugs, then single yourselves out in an administration as part of a large, broad group of public servants working day and night to do the right thing, and figure out what you're going to call yourselves before you call anyone else a name. This institutionalized racism that we have been facing starts out as fear. It's fear. It's got to be somewhere in there. There's this fear, this basic fear of something. And from that fear, it grows into a need for isolation. Then it grows into a defense and protection and antagonism and arrogance. Insensitivity develops, authoritarianism grows to control all of this seething, terrible problem, these people. It leads to an abuse of power, it leads to violence, it leads to name-calling, it leads to absolutely teaching our children the wrong way to go about caring for each other, and something that is tearing us apart at the seams because it is inconvenient, it disrupts the system, and because you don't know what to do. I don't want to judge anyone. But if this is your performance, please go perform somewhere else. We need each other, whether you know them or you don't. And the people we don't know need the people that we don't know, but they need the people that they do know. And it grows, and then sooner or later we're more interested in getting to know one another, caring for one another, oh my God, loving one another, instead of controlling, containing, diminishing, dismissing, dehumanizing. Nothing's going to change our world overnight. Nothing's going to change this overnight. We know that. But nothing could be more important than people who understand this and understand the broad scope of their healing responsibility in terms of humankind. Nothing could be more important than understanding this illness as we mitigate the one we're in that's kept most of us home for a long time. Let me read this. And if we are people of faith and put our faith and our beliefs second, or we compartmentalize all that to assure us of our own righteousness, then the knee on the neck of the black man or anyone else we see as other becomes the new national symbol that none of us want to see or see our children being carefully taught. Nobody wants this. So what's stopping us? And so the good news really, is that we are inside of this. Yeah, we're seeing, wow, are we seeing stuff that is really difficult and really tough? But we need to see it. And we need to do what we can. And as a world, as a nation, on this Pentecost and every day, we need to find ways to communicate with one another, to start to talk to one another's hearts, to stop dividing us. I want to hear a politician say, I don't care if I lose my job. This is what we need to do. This is what we need to say. This is what needs to happen. This is what needs to stop. Let's stop what's happening first before figuring out the solution to everything. Boy, if a politician stood up and said that with that kind of courage, I'd vote for them tomorrow and the next day. Stop trying to hide, to protect yourself. It's killing us. We have been given the solution, you know. We've been given the cure. Love one another. Yeah. Love one another. Love your God with all your heart and soul and might, and then love one another as yourself. There it is. There it is. There it is. It is where our authority as religious leaders, religious communities, and people of faith serving in their roles, it is where their authority to be public servants comes from understanding, from embracing, and from knowing that one thing. Love your God as you know that God with all your heart and your soul, and then love one another, and then do everything you can in the work you've been given to serve, to do the best you can to make that happen, and talk about it. Talk about loving one another. Not just when it's all chaos and things are breaking apart, and now you're desperate and you don't know what else to talk about, so somehow you revert to love because everything else that you have doesn't seem to work. Let this Pentecost be a time where all of us are inspired by the greatness above us, to embrace love for one another in every way we can, to let that be our guiding light. That's the cure, and it's not going to happen overnight, but at least we can set it into motion so that we know we are doing our part, which so many of us are. So many of us are, and we can get more to do their part, and we can begin to lead this nation and our lives in a way that prepares it for the love of the future, the love that God has given us to share with one another. That's our authority, is that the great commandment has called us to this. And ultimately, as well as presently, it's all that matters because it touches everything that matters, including the things, the conditions, the people we love and those we don't. And there's another part to it, that the words don't mean anything until we admit what we have done wrong, until we take steps, bold steps, to amend what we have done wrong and to ensure that it doesn't happen again without just blaming the victims for being upset or rageful. And we promise to love and to grow into love. We're going to struggle. We're going to struggle to love each other. We're going to struggle to see the other not as someone to fear. I'd rather struggle with that than wake up another morning with a pre-death knee on the neck of anyone, ever, anywhere, at any time. Let that inspire us. Amen.